Thank you, Chairman, and thanks to the panel for being with us today. Ms. Pletka, I wanted to talk a little bit more, drill down a little bit more based on your opening statement about the complex web through which Iran funds terrorist operations, including Hamas and Hezbollah. But I'd like to shift it a bit more towards Qatar. We know that they provide aid. We know that money is fungible. Can you tell me if you have any information available for the committee, give me an idea of what we should be concerned with in terms of those money flows and with money being fungible, being used for aligned purposes versus the purposes originally intended?
Thank you for the question. So I think as Dr. Levitt mentioned, part of the challenge here is that Qatar plays a double role. The first is a helpful interlocutor, a neutral government that provides money to Hamas to take the pressure off, something that the Israelis and the Americans and others have long been aware of. The problem is that first of all, this arrangement, deeply Faustian deal that ended up helping Hamas gather the money necessary to do what it did on October 7th. So, but there's blame to go around. But the broader problem is that Qatar is a home for terrorists, a home for terrorist money. It is a place where Ismail Haniyeh, the head of Hamas, lives in enormous wealth. $4 billion. Yes, part of that is in real estate in Gaza, part of that is in real estate elsewhere, part of that is in villas. This cannot be. We cannot have, on the one hand, a U.S. base and a nominal friend who also presents a homeland for every single terrorist group that, by the way, has been responsible not simply for the murder of Israelis, not simply for the murder of Americans in Israel, but responsible for the murder of Americans in Iraq, responsible for the murder of Americans all around the world. This is the challenge. And my most important priority here is to ask the question, what are they doing? How are they doing it? Are they providing financial flows to Hamas outside the arrangements they made? Of course they are. Are they providing financial arrangements to ISIS and to Hezbollah, as has been alleged in years past? Probably. They have unique influence with those groups, and unique influence doesn't just come from being a nice guy in the Middle East.
Yeah, and honestly, I think you've answered those questions. I believe probably that you are correct, and we need to get to the bottom. I want to talk a little bit about the Biden administration, where I am at odds with their Middle East strategy and the assumption that Iran is a rational and could potentially be a good faith actor. I don't see any logic behind that. And I think it was that logic that led, at least initially, to the $6 billion that was going to be released to Iran. So does anything, and Ms. Pletka, this is for you or anyone on the panel that may want to answer, does anything lead you all to believe that having that posture from this administration is productive and has any foundation or justification? And Ms. Pletka, we'll start with you, but I'm just trying to get why we would think that Iran has any role to play in de-escalating the tensions in the Middle East based on their past behavior.
Well, this was a conceit of the Obama administration that, in fact, if we could get Iran to step away from its aggressive nuclear weapons program, that they would eventually evolve into a more constructive player in the region. The reverse has been true. I don't think there's any reason on earth, after Iran has armed the Hashd al-Shaabi, the popular mobilization units in Iraq, Hezbollah in Lebanon, the Houthis in Syria, Hamas, Palestinian Islamic Jihad, and numerous other groups. There's no reason to believe why Iran has a constructive role to play in any sense. And let's not forget, please, we talk about what Iran does to these countries, how Iran has been responsible for the death of Americans and Israelis. Let's not forget what Iran does to its own people. Mahsa Amini was a great cause for us last year. Last week, they murdered another 16-year-old girl for exactly the same reason. This is an execrable regime. I'm going to leave a second for you, Matt.
Yeah, Mr. Chair, what if I may, because I want to be mindful of time, if anyone on the panel disagrees with the position that I've taken or the response from Ms. Pletka, I'd like to give them equal time.
Well, anyway.
Thank you so much for the question. I'm too smart a man to disagree with Danielle Pletka publicly. But I do think, at least in my conversations with administration officials, I've yet to hear anybody use that type of language. I don't know anybody in the Biden administration who thinks Iran has a constructive role to play. I think there were people
And
who
maybe
think,
perhaps you could get to why we would actually, well, we know that the mistakes of the Obama administration, but why we would even put $6 billion on the table if in fact that's not true.
I think the $6 billion, which I had problems with, was entirely about securing the release of American citizens. And if someone else had a better idea for how to secure the release of these Americans, I'd be all ears. Giving Iran $6 billion was extremely uncomfortable, but I think it wasn't in a vacuum. We were trying to secure the release of Americans, which is...
I think the irony of it is money being fungible, it could be those very dollars that now have some 200 people being held hostage by Hamas. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Thanks.